So we talked about negotiating criminal negotiations, and now how to negotiate tax audits, which again seems sort of scary and overwhelming to, who knows all those laws? Who knows all the ins and outs? I guess
where I started for the perspective of a tax audit, think about the poor little auditor.
Oh, yeah.
No one ever really thinks about the tax auditor, and that's how I think about it. And that's sort of where I've learned how to negotiate with the IRS is that my dad, before we started this practice, he was a lifelong government employee. So I sort of saw it, when people would be in the news railing about government employees, oh, they're doing this and that. It's like, that's my dad. What are you talking about my dad for? So you want to put yourself in their shoes. And so here's the thing about the tax examiners, not auditors. They're not auditors. No. They're examiners. Where do they come from? How are they trained? What are they given? And typically what you see that there's not as many auditors as there used to be. There used to be field auditors all the time. Now the number is like half the amount. So most of the audits are done by mail, first of all. Most of the audits are done by mail. They'll say, hey, send us proof of this, send us proof of that. So there's really never a face-to-face with somebody who's going to come to your house.
Yep.
Now, in the cases where you do have those field examiners, this is who they typically are. They're young women, tend to be women who always did things right. They tend to be the teacher's pet. And that's just my sort of impression of them. So here they are, and they're trying to be good government employees, and they take pride in their work. Now, they're given some training, but when I think about the training they're given, they're not given that basic training of you're invading someone's house. Everything that they hold dear, you're going to go investigate. Do you understand what that feels like? Okay, that they're going to come back and they're not going to be, you can be, and this is they tend to be young and very pleasant, and they're smiling, and they can't figure out why these people are like, wow, they just don't seem like they like me all that much.
They're taking all my stuff.
And it's so scary when it's your life under the microscope, no matter how clean you are. Sometimes when you've done things are a little shady, it's a little more relaxed. Like, hey, let's see if they find it, right? Hey, I get what's coming for him. So you look at it from their perspective, and they're frightened. In so many ways, they're absolutely frightened because they haven't been getting the training. They don't have the life experience. They have been teachers' pets their whole life. They don't know what it's like to go into a situation and have to schmooze your way out because you didn't do the right thing.
Yep.
You totally forgot something, and now you have to cover for it. I've had a lifetime of that. I've done the wrong thing for so long. My God, it's so easy. That's where I feel like, doing this, it's like, well, we do all the background, we do all the work, we check all our things, and so that when I go to negotiate, it feels like I'm cheating.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, right? Okay, what's the excuse today?
Yes.
All right, let's think about let's try to get this all to work. So they're really coming from a place where they're expecting everything to be done in a certain way, and they can't imagine that something wouldn't be done right. And so now they have to put it in their head because they can't figure out, well, why would someone do the wrong thing? Well, according to my training that I've taken, that this is the way taxpayers are supposed to do this. And they should have a record of everything like here. But I don't understand why this taxpayer didn't do it the way that the training said they should do it. Like it's backwards. They think that life should mirror their training, not that the training should mirror life.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they're putting together a narrative in their head, like, well, what's the reason why? Why is this person not doing it the right way? And that's where your negotiation comes out. You got to start the narrative out. Why? Why is it this? Why are we seeing it this way that you're not used to seeing it? Why are these numbers looking like this? Why does it look suspicious? Okay. And you have to address that right away. And if that's usually every case, something looks a little, there's a reason you're being audited, right?
And you want to be honest again.
You want to be honest. If there's bad facts, you want to limit them. You don't have to go out and say, oh, here's all my bad facts. Here's a list of all my bad facts. If they ask you something about a bad fact, yes, you do have to answer it. You don't want to lie about it, but you don't necessarily need to audit, or you don't need to volunteer every incriminating piece of evidence out there at all. You don't want to necessarily do that.
But I erased
Answer
my Google history.
So you want to get your story out to them so that they feel comfortable about who your client is. Okay. If I think Clarence Darrow said my first job is to make the jury like my client. Well, guess what? In some cases, that's not possible. Okay. Your client's coming in and flashy, everything's going off wrong. And
he shaved his widow's peak.
He shaved his widow's peak. He's got a Bob Gucci-owned medallion, and just everything is like, oh, you don't want this guy around. But, hey, he's a great guy. I mean, as far as we know, he sort of might have a strip club or two, cousins and bail bondsmen, lots of things like that. So the thing is, if you can't get them to like your client, which isn't how, get them to pity. Pity is also good. To say, well, look, the guy, he thinks he's a mobster. The poor guy. Look.
He shaved his widow's peak.
He shaved his widow's peak. He's going around. He's wasted his life. If this guy could just get his act together, he could make a lot more money than doing these stupid things that he's doing. And then there's an audit technique right there. The auditor can say, yeah. Well, then, all right. Well, then my job is then to, I want to help educate this taxpayer on being better at business. So we're moved from finding problems to say, here, let's help you out.
Right.
Let's work together to help you out. So, okay, so now in the future, to do it this way. Oh, okay. And then that's where you can get into some play, then you get into some proposed changes. And also a great technique is, again, the best negotiating technique is doing the actual work. Because time and time again, clients didn't put down all their expenses. They were too lazy to go through and do that legwork to come up with their actual number. And then they're not thinking that an expense is a legitimate expense. Well, no, that's a legitimate business expense. You don't know everything. So many times we come in the auditor, we're talking about how big the refund is going to be. That's a better position to be in. So now the auditor's like, okay, let's try to wrap this up, because every time you open your mouth, this is costing the IRS more money. So they're looking to close it out a little bit quicker, and then they also get the point of saying in their closeout that they get to say, look, I've helped the taxpayer become compliant in the future.
Right.
And that's what their overall mission is, and that's what they feel good about.
Is that what they feel good about, or are they judged on that in work? Like, how many cases have you closed? How many have you negotiated? How many have you done this?
They're gauged on what they can close out successfully.
Okay.
And roughly what they can close out without a lot of headaches.
Okay.
Getting agreements is good. What they don't want to do is go to appeals. They hate appeals. IRS auditors hate appeals. And we have some ex-IRS auditors here, and they're like, oh, I hate appeals. Well, we love appeals because the appeals will take a look at things from maybe our perspective and find some medium ground to find something a little bit reasonable. Also, a lot of times the IRS is like, okay, what's the point of assessing all this tax if the person's never going to pay it back? The IRS has that 10 years of time to collect on a tax, and after you take into account all the expenses, what are they really going to get? So why go for a huge amount no one's going to agree to and fight to the death? Or you can go to this. Here's a repayment. So there's some other negotiations there too.
Yep.
Now, sometimes you get something where you just can't. I mean, you have an auditor who you don't like, who doesn't like your client, who's acting unprofessionally, who is doing everything wrong, who you just can't stand the look of. You're having a problem with their manager. Nothing is going well, and there's a way to negotiate that too.
Really?
And this is what you do. Make it all about documents, and you shut your mouth.
Okay. Yes. I just did that dealing with an insurance lady. Everything was via email. I never once spoke to her. Well, after she started to get difficult, you're right. Here's all the documentation. I don't need to actually have any emotional conversations with you.
And the people, their job is to get you all emotional so you get off your game. So now you're mad at them personally. They're winning.
Yeah. Because
you lost sight of what was important. So when that's happening, you're just like, okay. And, I would like to say I've never got upset at an IRS employee. I have. And I get mad at myself. I'm like, I let them, I let them get inside me.
Yep.
But always I kept I'm going to make the record though. This is going on the record. And guess what? You're not the final decision maker here. And I know that. And I'm not going to say that to your face because you're just going to come back and be snotty back to me. But I'm just going to say, okay, well, I'm going to respectfully appeal this decision. And then that's where you get into appeals. And you can talk to, get something a little bit more reasonable and say, here, this is what the record says. This is what the documents are. And what somebody's personal opinion is. And there are stories I have heard, more stories I've heard than I've personally dealt with, of IRS examiners who have been really unprofessional.
Ooh, like what?
Okay. Here's a juicy story.
Okay.
An attorney who came in, who represented him, he was doing some tax work. He's not a tax attorney, but he was helping out a client. And this was years after the fact. He goes, I got involved in this audit. I shouldn't have done it. It turned out horrible. And so I was going to the audit and just trying to help the client out. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, okay, but they really didn't make this money here. This is the proof. This is where the money, this is what it was for. The auditor goes, oh yeah? You're not the big attorney you think you are. The guy's like, okay, what? We know you made $42,000 last year.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a jerk.
So they will do, and that's totally goes again. You're not supposed to look at that, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And who catches you? That sort of stuff goes on all the time. I have no idea. That's always makes me nervous when I file my tax returns. Like, okay, hey, big shot. Yeah. Like, okay, what are they going to use against me? And they can get it. And, they get the information. So they're like, the guy was just dumbfounded. He's like, and they said it in front of the client too.
No way.
Yeah.
Hey, I noticed that you drive a Ford Focus.
Hey there, big guy, huh? Doing great at that practice of law, huh? $42,000, huh? Right on. Top of your game. Right.
How's that Rolex? Spelled with an A you're wearing. The Rolex. Wow.
Yeah, so situations like that, when that happens, you just sort of like, okay, that's exactly a situation where you say, yep, we're just going to leave the documents here. We're going to stop communication, and we'll take our appeal rights. And at that point, you'd also get the Treasury Inspector General involved. They would go investigate the complaint and the unauthorized access of taxpayer information, and probably nothing would happen.
Yeah.
But you at least got it on record that they did something. And where that would really pay, this is where it's dangerous for the IRS, is when they do something like that, and you have it on the record. If you go to appeals, the appeals officer is going to be on your side. They just are. They're going to say, oh my God, that was such a dirtbag move for them to do. I'm not going to tolerate that. That's just underhanded. No, I'm going to be on your side. Even if that appeals officer wasn't on your side, you'd still have the ability to go to tax court. Do you think the tax court wants to have that in the record? Oh yeah, and then the IRS examiner accessed the power of attorney's AGI and mocked him for his low income. Not something you really want to have there.
No. All right, so what we've learned so far in negotiating with the IRS is be honest and do your due diligence, or hire someone that can do the due diligence.
I would say make sure you get you want to be honest, but you don't want to volunteer too much information.
Right.
So for questions you're asked, you be honest. Make sure they're framed properly, though. Make sure the context is there. Make sure you understand what connections they'll likely make with it. And if you do not have a narrative out in front, they're going to invent their own that probably isn't going to be favorable to you.
Got it.
So you really have to craft your story. You're not trying to lie, but just say, look, this is a good guy who is just a taxpayer.
Yep.
They don't deserve the full scorn of all of your massive power. Let's just close this case out reasonably. Here's some things. You know what? We'll help each other go along. You'll learn a little bit about your job, and you'll help the taxpayer become more compliant taxpayer.
Makes sense.